Today, we're diving into a pivotal and pretty tragic naval battle from early 1942. It's a story of a hastily assembled Allied fleet that sailed into the Java Sea for one desperate last stand. So let's set the scene. It's February 1942, and for the Allies in the Pacific, things are looking really bad. The Japanese war machine has just been rolling over everything in its path, capturing territories and vital resources. And the next big prize on their list? The Dutch East Indies, and more importantly, its absolutely crucial oil fields. So, what's standing in their way? Well, it's this brand new, pretty desperate alliance known as ABDA. Think of it as a grab bag of American, British, Dutch, and Australian ships, and really, they were the last and only hope to defend the key island of Java. What's about to unfold is just a brutal, head-on collision that's going to decide the fate of the entire campaign. It's truly a story of incredible courage against impossible odds. All right, let's get into it. Who exactly were these defenders? Let's break down the forces that were about to clash in this desperate fight. Okay, so if you just look at the numbers, you might think the Allies had a decent shot. Their force, led by the Dutch Rear Admiral Karel Doorman, had 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers. Not bad, right? But they were up against a Japanese force with 2 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a whopping 14 destroyers. And you gotta pay attention to that destroyer advantage. It is absolutely going to be a game changer. But you know, numbers on a slide never tell the whole story, do they? The real problem, the critical weakness here, was that this wasn't one unified fleet. It was just a collection of ships from 4 different navies that had literally never trained together. We're talking different combat doctrines, communication systems that couldn't talk to each other, and, get this, huge language barriers between the Dutch admiral and his mostly English-speaking captains. It was, well, a recipe for total disaster. So on February 27th, Admiral Doorman leads his fleet out to try and stop the Japanese invasion convoy. The 2 sides finally spot each other, and the Battle of the Java Sea begins. For the first couple of hours, it's kind of a stalemate. Both fleets are firing at extreme range, and pretty much everything is just splashing harmlessly into the ocean. Neither side can seem to land a hit. The Japanese even launch a whole bunch of torpedoes, but they all miss. You know, for a little while there, it almost felt like the Allies might actually be able to hold their own. And the Japanese could feel it. Their commander, Rear Admiral Takagi, basically said, "The enemy is in no shape to fight us." And that quote, it tells you everything. It shows how confident he was for sure, but also how much he was underestimating just how determined the Allies were. But a stalemate like that was never going to last. In a huge naval battle like this one, everything can change in a split second. And for the Allies, that moment was coming. After hours of trying, the Japanese gunners finally dial it in. They find their target, and the result is absolutely devastating. It's the Japanese heavy cruiser Haguro that lands the critical blow. Just one 8-inch shell, but it smashes right into the engine room of the British cruiser HMS Exeter. Her speed just collapses, going from almost 30 knots down to 5. I mean, she's basically a sitting duck at this point. And that one hit, it just rips the scab off the fleet's biggest weakness. As the crippled Exeter pulls out of the battle line, the other Allied cruisers see it and think they've missed an order from the admiral, so they follow her. The whole formation just shatters into chaos. It's that communication breakdown they were all worried about, happening in real time. So, in the middle of all this confusion, the Japanese launch another wave of torpedoes. And the range on the one that hits, it's just mind-blowing. Look at this, 22,000 yards. Let that sink in. That is over 12 miles away. So about 15 minutes after it was fired from the Haguro, one of those famous, almost mythical Japanese long-lance torpedoes finds its target. The Dutch destroyer Kortenaar gets hit, and it literally breaks in 2, sinking almost immediately. It's an incredible and terrifying demonstration of Japan's superior torpedo tech, and it's another gut punch to the Allied fleet, which is already falling apart. Okay, so night is falling, and the situation is looking pretty grim. The Allied fleet is scattered all over the place, one cruiser is basically useless, and a destroyer is at the bottom of the sea. But you know what? Admiral Doorman, he's not ready to give up just yet. So what does he do? He makes a really fateful decision. Even with all the losses, even with the chaos, he hasn't forgotten his main objective: get to those Japanese transport ships. He decides he's going to regroup his remaining ships and go for it one more time, using the darkness as cover. But as he's trying to do this, his fleet just keeps getting smaller. First, the 4 American destroyers have to head for home. They're out of torpedoes and running on fumes. Then, in a truly tragic moment, the British destroyer HMS Jupiter hits a friendly Dutch mine and sinks. And to top it off, Dorman orders his last destroyer, HMS Encounter, to go rescue survivors from the Courtenay. So just like that, he's down to only 4 cruisers. And the worst part? Doorman has no idea that a Japanese float plane has been shadowing him the whole time, reporting his every move. So the Japanese cruisers, Haguro and Nachi, they know exactly where he is, and they're setting up a perfect ambush. They're just waiting for him to sail right into it. And the end, when it comes, is brutally fast. The Japanese cruisers launch their torpedoes and just melt back into the darkness. HLMS Java gets hit, and her ammunition magazine just detonates in this massive fireball. Minutes later, another torpedo slams into Dorman's own flagship, the De Ruyter. The ship loses all power, it's just burning uncontrollably, and Admiral Dorman, he goes down with his ship. A final, tragic act of naval tradition. So the main battle is over, but the nightmare for the ABDA fleet wasn't. The Japanese were not about to let anyone get away. They began to relentlessly hunt down every last survivor. And this grim final chapter played out over the next 48 hours. The American cruiser Houston and the Australian cruiser Perth, they were caught and sunk the very next day. 2 days after that, the crippled Exeter and her escort destroyer were found and finished off. When the dust settled, only those 4 American destroyers that left early managed to escape to Australia. The entire striking force was just gone, wiped out. The strategic result of all this was total and complete. The Allies' naval shield in Southeast Asia was just shattered. The island of Java fell pretty soon after, and that gave Japan control of those oil-rich islands they so desperately needed. That oil would fuel their war machine for years. And so this all brings us to the big question, right? I mean, the battle was a complete disaster, an absolute defeat. But the men who fought, they showed incredible bravery against impossible odds. So was their sacrifice just a futile gesture? Or did their last stand, however doomed, buy the Allies just enough precious time to regroup somewhere else? It's a really tough question, and it's one that historians are still debating.